Hey man, I ain't feeling my best today. I don't know what kind of damn flu and pneumonia combo I had. They can have that ish back, like for real. I'm a little worn out, so I didn't do that active recovery like I was explaining. Well, you know what? I take that back. I take that back because active recovery is cool. Uh, Normally, like I said, that's the cardio days. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday for me, because my workout Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday. So the active recovery will be 2 days out the week. But I actually did do something. I did something. Uh, I was reading that. Yeah, I was reading this. I was studying. So sometime if you just completely out of it and drained, keep your, you got to keep that mind and that spirit sharp. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I was doing. I kept that mind sharp. Now, also, I had some, I had a real good conversation with a dear friend of mine. But anyway, that's kind of what I want to talk about a little bit with y'all. Just trying to stay active, but I ain't gonna be on here that long. But me and her kind of got deep, and it's something I've typed before and put it in the. I put it in the in my story, right? And it's this concept that the only thing that exists is God, is Yah, Yahuwah. I'm gonna share something with y'all. See, when you facing your mortality, and it's something you can feel, but there's something that spiritually happens to you in that process. Now, mind you, it ain't just that. You also experience it, like when you do things like meditate or fast. And ever since I did that fast, one of the things we were talking about is the effect that it had on me and just my own philosophies, right? And I'm not saying this to rattle the nest. I'm definitely not going to be on here arguing with nobody. No, I ain't doing none of that. But I do want to talk about it a little bit, right? What I would like to tell, what I want to express to y'all is that individualism, I really believe, is false. It's not real. It's something that we perceive because your life is what dies when you die. Basically, is your ego. I don't believe your consciousness does, and I'm gonna explain why. Okay, so ancient wisdom. You've heard sayings like "birds of a feather flock together," "a house divided against itself can't stand," and things of that nature, right? And like I said, when you face with your own mortality and certain experiences, or if you get deep into meditation and fasting, you kind of will come to the conclusion of what I'm talking about. I think a lot of ancient philosophers, uh, and they ain't all African, even though that's my path. Uh, you know what I'm saying? But ancient philosophers such as their greats, Socrates, you could even say, excuse me, I am tired. I'm a little worn out, so I ain't gonna keep this long, but I do want to share this with y'all because when me and her were talking, we touched upon this. And I thought it was just good to kind of share that, and hopefully it helps somebody, process things such as a loss. But going back to it, so basically what I was saying, ancient philosophers like Socrates or Buddha, Confucius, they all kind of came to this conclusion that um, that life ain't quite what you think it is on the surface level. Now, probably since I could talk, I had this fascination with death. Not only that, I was deeply into God, to Yah. I can't tell you why. It was just innate. From the time I was like 2 or 3, I was asking my people, why do we die? Then I would always be the person to ask them, like when movies and stuff came out, like who died in the movie and stuff like that, right? And I just studied it. I started looking at people with near-death experience. I meditated and prayed on it. Because the concept of non-existence, I don't know. It was something about it that intrigued me. So, I was fortunate to come from a community, to be taught from said community and leadership, such as Ben Ami, Abba Gadol, a lot. But, I'm a man who can think for himself as well. So, and even though he probably has said this one way or another, well, he has. What I've come to believe and understand is that we are all just Yah having a human experience. So let me give you an example of that. Because one concept I believe in before I start that is if you understand one system, you can understand them all. Because a system is just a group of components that make the whole. Now, a lot of y'all probably never read that post, so I'm just going to say it like this. I'm going to be blunt. And again, I ain't trying to rattle the nest. I ain't argue with your mama. I joke. But here's what I mean, right? So, as me and the sister was talking about, let's say God is the ocean. I'm going to give you an example of how my mind processes things. So let's say Yah is the ocean, right? We can say he's all the oceans or whatever, because I just don't want to limit him. So let's say he's all the water on earth. This is just an example. It's a metaphor, all right? And it does say in the Bible, he's like the life-giving waters. So let's say he's the ocean. You take, let's say you take this bottle of water, and you fill it up. Let me see, I got a better example. Let's say you fill it up, right? This is the water, is the consciousness and the spirit of Yah. The label, you can say, is your race, right? Or the people you come from. Some of the writings on that, you can say, is your culture or religion for a lot of you. A lot of you are in a religion. So let's just say, these labels all equate to your personality, your individual personality, or your ego. Because it's the ego that dies, right? So let's say this water is life-giving water. So its job is to give life to whomever consumes it. That's your fruits of your labor, what you talk about, what you be about. Well, let's say tragedy strike. Let's say this water, you see that bottle up there? Let's say that water bottle, it falls off the shelf or something in transit. Or it's in transit and it get in a car. There's a car wreck. And let's say the contents leak out, right? That is to symbolize the physical process of death. Now, when this happens, there's a process of, say, osmosis, where the sun absorbs the water, right? It goes into the clouds, right? Now, remember, this water was Yah and part of his whole form. And then it's rained back down into the body of water, that ocean that it came from. You can verify this, like even in Genesis, it tells you, it's this misconception that, our spirits, whether you wicked or anything like that, goes to hell, right? I don't believe in that. Not hell in the sense that it's being described. Now, I will say Yah is boundless. He don't have boundaries. He exists within and without and outwardly, externally, from time and space. So in the Bible it tells you he's omnipotent, he's all powerful and knowing, and he's everywhere at one time. But the reason why he's everywhere at one time, in my opinion, is because he's everything. He's not even just what we consider living. He's a part of the material realm. Because when you really consider something, man has never really created anything. I'm going to explain why. Because we can't create from the ether, right? This world contains resources. So all man does is take these resources that are already here, and he applies his imagination to it. It shows you how powerful Yah is. He applies that, and then that's his work. So say something like this phone I'm holding, or a TV, or, a car, or anything that's man-made, right? The point is that man ain't really a creator so much as he is a molder or a potter. So, with that said, because everything came from Yah and relies on his existence to even exist, whether it's something materialistic or if it's life in some form, it all comes from Yah. And it eventually all goes back, right? So what I'm saying is this. When you die, again, that spirit, it tells you in the Bible that Yah demands the life force of everything back, despite whether you were good or evil. Now, that doesn't mean we got to use some discernment. It doesn't mean the wicked go unpunished. It don't mean that. It don't mean we in some paradise. Not we, because I ain't wicked. But for the wicked, it don't mean you in some paradise. Because it clearly tells you, too, in the Bible, death is different for a righteous man. It's more like a sleep versus a wicked one. Right? And like that saying, wicked people die 1,000 times. That means that could mean a lot of stuff. It could mean literally. It means, time repeat itself. It could mean, and you keep reliving that. We got to imagine that hell, we can't even fathom it. That's how you receive your correction for being wicked. If you lived a totally wicked life, or the majority of your life was like that, you're going to be corrected. So that could also mean being reborn as something like a damn fruit fly. Can you imagine that? Being smashed, being clapped because you're running off instincts. All I'm saying is that, again, you got to look at these saints. And there was a particular point in the Bible, it was something I read, I forgot to share that with her, is when David questioned God, when he questioned Yah as to why Yah forbid a census being taken of Judah and Israel as a whole. The Judeans and the Israelites, which really weren't people, but you got the different tribes, whatever. But he forbid that. And I used to think to myself, like, what is the big deal about that? Well, when you read that, he goes on to say, because he don't see man the way we do. He asked David, could you count all the grains of sand on the beach? Then he asked him, could you count all the stars in the sky? And David replied to him, nah, that's impossible. Well, and he said because he sees it as one. This is why in the Bible too, he refers to us as children or his wife, because metaphorically speaking, and I think literally speaking, since Yah see he's only truth and about truth, he sees us for what we actually are, which are natural clones of him. Now granted, you can corrupt yourself. So that same bottle of water can be what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. Again, because I'm tired. But you know, like how they make soda or something, right? When they had that fizz. So let's say they turn that bottle of water into a Coke. And we can say that's the devil. We can say the Coke plant is the devil. Much smaller than the ocean in scale, but it does have wicked power. And that's because the created started to think it was superior to the creator, right? So it can make its own, like, individual. So the clones can make clones, or the copy can make copies. So some of these people that you run into, the Epsteins of the world and the Bill Gates and stuff like that, we have to use some type of discernment. Though the original source was Yah, the apple has fallen so far from the tree, or if you will, it's become that. Another example I use is computers, right? Let's say you put a music CD in there. We can say that's Yah. Then you copy the file onto the computer. Then you burn it. But you might change the order of the songs. You might, put less songs or make a mixtape, mix CD or whatever, or playlist in the digital age we're in now. All that. But you can play. Once you copy those files, you can insert that disc or that hard drive it's on into a different stereo system or whatnot and play track 5 while the original might be still on track 1. So it looks, to the naked eye, like it's separate. So at the end of the day, the last example I would say is, look at your hand. When you see this hand, right, it looks like it's just a whole part of me. But if I put this hand under a microscope, what do you see? Individual cells. Because I am one to believe, again, if you understand one system, you understand it all. Size is only relative to the individual's experience. So like, the world of an ant, the world of a spider, the world of a bird, the world of a lion, the world of a human is completely or seemingly different, right? Because we look like we are all in our individual vehicles, these bodies. But when you look at your hand under a microscope, you see cells and then movement. These individuals, for all intents and purposes, are damn near basically a society. It's like that movie Osmosis Jones. That concept to me was always brilliant. So let's say, it got its army, a police force. And we can say that's, the immune system, right? Then you can say, okay, the blood system or whatever is the highway. You can say the nervous system is, I don't know, like the, you can say that's like information. I'm just giving you an example. But the point is, that's when you on ground level, when you at that base level looking at it. But if you dial that microscope back and you looking from a more of a bird's eye view, you see the cells make the tissue. So we can say the tissue is either the cities or the states. No, better yet, the continents. You dial it back some more further away, then you see uh, the organs. And we can say the organs are the celestial bodies, meaning the planets and the solar system, all the stars and all that, right? But when you dial back even further, you then begin to see you as a whole. You understand? So, in other words, everyone is a universe, not UNIVERSE, but YOUNIVERSE. I don't know if I spelled it right. I'm so out of it, but you get the point. So it's a universe, and then we collectively make the multiverse, because that's why we're pretty much the same on a base level, but there are differences that alter it a little bit. But the multiverse all together, every living thing, from the cell to you, the animals, the flora and the fauna, and even the inanimate objects, make up what I would say the body of Yah. So it's basically Yah having, in my humble opinion, a human experience, because and that's why I say serving Yah is serving your highest self. This is why you're blessed when you do it. This is why if you go against it, you curse, because you can't go against yourself. Your highest self is telling you what's beneficial for you on all levels. That's what the Bible is for. When correctly discerned, because the devil implanted himself in it too, and his power in it too. I ain't finna get into that right now. But that's how I see it. And I'm telling y'all this for a few reasons. For one, I've had my own experiences where, especially like dealing in matters of life and death. But not only that, when I've lost loved ones, and to kind of cope. But not only that, I start studying like near-death experiences. I understand not everybody recalls what that was like. Some people that went to a coma said it was blank, and then they just woke up like they were asleep. The point is, though, most people who go through like real serious life-threatening things and they have near-death experiences, it's a phenomenon. Like when nurses and doctors explain when a person is on their deathbed, some of the things that they see that happens, where they're seeing loved ones or, angels coming to get them or whatever the case. And some people think that's the brain shutting down and showing them that. I don't, because they did an experiment where these people proved that they were, even though they were unconscious, they were more conscious and more present than they ever had been within their body. Matter of fact, they describe it like they feel like they become a part of the whole. And when they come back into the body, it limits their perception, but they still retain, some type of, I guess you could say, remembrance of that experience. So the ones who come back and explain or try to explain, because you can't really put it into words, basically what they say is that life itself is like a symphony. Well, Michael Jackson said that, but not only that, it's other people who said, yeah, that life is like a symphony. This is why when you listen to frequencies and stuff like that, they can have a healing effect, or negative music can have a negative effect. That's why plants die if you listen to certain type of songs with the wrong energy. A lot of, rap songs and stuff that have, that have been structured in a certain way. This is why the powers that be use the, celebrity and entertainment against us, especially in the form of music. That's why they push an artist to be as ignorant as they can be and they promote that because even though they'll, giving him crumbs off the table too. What he serves is as, even though his life or her life is fixed, like take somebody like a Nicki Minaj or something, right? Or 50 Cent. They can spread a lot of negativity in their music, but it affects you if you listening to it, and then you find yourself in a club or in a situation with your significant other, and you actually start imbuing the attributes of the stuff you listen to all the time or watch. Because if you watching something like Real Housewives or Love and Hip Hop, you can literally get in an argument with your woman or man and find that you sitting there talking to them in a manner where you were that was impressed upon you from your programming and condition over the years. They do this in all kind of ways. Why? Because they understand what I'm talking about. They understand that life itself is that this world that we in. You better listen to them when they say this, because sometimes we think that a lot of us think we're going to recognize evil when it's in our face. But that's why everybody's so damn shocked with these Epstein files and stuff like that. Except for those of us who were really woke. I hate that term. But, the way they misuse it now. But for those of us that was truly conscious, and we've been saying this forever, and even we can't believe now that it's in full effect, it's hard for us to believe the magnitude of it. But I say that to say that when Epstein, those files, you know what Epstein said? And this was real profound. He said that this reality is not the base reality. So a lot of times they'll tell you the truth in plain sight. They'll show it to you in movies and media and in the music. But what happens is, if it go over your head, or if you don't react to it, your defense mechanism, your fight or flight don't activate, then they look at it like, hey, that sheep, that pig, that cow deserve the fate that come to them. That's why I always say America is really a big farm. If you remember the movie Charlotte's Web, right? Remember, Charlotte saved the pig. I forgot his name. Because she knew that he would be slaughtered. So she was using her web to basically make messages. And I forgot the whole entire movie. But if you remember, the pig was naive and always happy. And, to him, life on the farm, he had a silver spoon in his mouth. What that sound like? America's with their entitlement, right? We got this, a lot of us got like America, this overly patriotic BS attitude about this hellhole, right? We got that concept in us, stuck in us, saying it's the greatest country in the world and all that. Well, it's the greatest farm. Yeah, because it's a farm. Because it's done made you docile and real weak and vulnerable. And when, you can live a whole lifetime, seasons. But when that farmer comes in there and it's time for Thanksgiving and you plump and fat from all your spoils, it's time for the slaughter. But guess who, they got their own problems and they got to survive, but at least they have their survival instincts. Guess who has that? The wild boar that's on the outside looking in, maybe even sometimes wishing he was on that farm. But if only he knew. Because if the farmer tried to come for him, he gonna fight vehemently for his life. And he may even win that fight. So it's better to even be in a less than ideal situation, because it conditions you on how to survive. So people like third world countries or, whatnot like that, but especially the ones who rebel against their governments, they're considered the animals that's in the wild. And they have survival instincts still. See, again, if you understand one system, you understand it all. My primary focus in worldly things is like computers and stuff. I build them and all kind of manner of things. And I've always been real savvy with electronics since I was like a baby, like for real. My mother can tell you some stories. But, from an early age, I used to take apart my Nintendo, study. Without no guides, I made my own. I would draw out a blueprint and studying and stuff. And it made me conclude whether it's a physical, tangible system that's made, computer parts. Because remember, a system is just parts coming together. But not only that, also systems such as a financial system, an educational system, a government system. Then you have like other, man-made things like cars and stuff. They are systems. Bunch of different moving parts coming together to make the whole. So these elites understand that. We are taught most of the time in inferior education as to why, and that's why we don't understand this concept. And this is why they show perfect allegiance to their God, the devil, or his other many names, Satan, Baal. You understand? Part of that whole Iran thing that they got pissed about was the fact that
Are you going to be able to put that at 12 tomorrow?
but part of the reason why they got pissed about that is because they got pissed when they saw Iran burn down that statue. Now, there's other reasons because they trying to. I'm gonna tell you what I think the play is, and I'm gonna wrap this up. Ultimately, when you paying attention to all these things like AI, when you paying attention to, now this alien talk, they even out here saying dinosaurs were fake, and they're saying dragons were real. Do y'all understand that? So even if that's true to any degree, the point is all this truth is coming out now simply for one reason. And I gotta admit, like, I kind of I believe it to be half. I don't believe if dragons were real, I don't know if they was breathing fire and all that. But too many different ancient cultures around the world had concepts of these flying lizards or dragons. The point is that, and even with the AI stuff, see, AI in itself, to give you an example again of what I was talking about, right? About God being this thing. AI in itself is essentially, it's not a digital man. It is when it's in its robot body. But essentially, it's a false God. Why? Because something that's intangible that you can't see, but it's information and it has self-awareness, can put itself in these bodies, or people put them in the bodies, and it can interact on this physical plane. And you can have the same AI in a multitude of bodies, and it's again, they appear to be individuals. Now, it'll never be as powerful as the Most High because so I'm not liking it onto that. But it's a major threat to mankind because it can essentially do a lot of stuff that we just simply can't. Not unless you tapped in. And the power of Yah, divine intervention comes into play. But anyway, so what I say is this. Now, even for the loved ones I lost, what I mourn is just me missing them and having to wait until a time frame where we reunite in this reality or another. But the point that I'm making to you is that essentially they just changed form. And that form, they either became part of Yah again, or guess what? They might have got bottled up again and living another life physically. Yeah, because who's to say if you were summoned here once, what make you think you can't be summoned here again? That's why I don't subscribe to that whole YOLO thing, because it ain't about you only living once. Also, for those of us who are familiar with video games or whatever, right? I know the older generation might not be as familiar with the term NPC. NPC means non-player character. They're doing studies and trying to make sense of reality. And one other thing that I used to look at as a kid, that I'm wrapping this up, is when we would be on our way to and fro my grandmother's house, because we lived in Atlanta and they stayed, in Emerson. My people from Emerson and Cartersville, but we initially grew up in Atlanta. But on those trips, I used to look in the car and imagine look at other people's cars and see them and imagine what their life was like, especially if they was of a different race or culture or whatever, right? But even my own. And one time I was doing that, I just simply remember looking away and wondering, do they exist when I'm not looking? Well, if you don't believe me, when they in that harp or something like that, wherever they doing those colliding particles, they did this experiment, and I ain't got all the details, but I can't explain it anyway. I'm not a scientist, but I understand the concept. Basically, what they did was they was looking at these particles, and they theorized something. The particles would like move and have certain effects, but then they realized if you're not observing it, and they said it terrified them. The particle stops moving. What this implies is that it moves once it knows, once you perceive it. So like in a game, sometime when you're going from different rooms or scenes, it's what you do and call loading. So those scenes, those characters, the NPC, mean non-player characters, while your character is pretty much always on screen, the NPCs that you interact with, they might not be there. So again, what this means is, what I interpret it as, is that you have to be conscious at all times. Because your consciousness basically verifies life. It verifies the existence of Yah. Yeah. It's all kinds of wild theories. Now they doing quantum computers and stuff, and they found out too with these quantum computers that there are multiple realities. Yeah, y'all gotta look this stuff up. So when Epstein them say this stuff, that this ain't the base reality, and they sacrificing kids and all that, we think of them like a bunch of quacks. And it is an evil thing regardless. Don't get it twisted. I ain't somewhere championing this, because what they doing is cheating the system that y'all made in the most evil fashion, right? But what I mean is, because again, they serving their God, Satan. And he's leveling them up with these sacrifices or whatever, because you can progress. Positive people associate progress. The father of Ben Ami used to always talk about this. But people associate progress with positivity. But you can progress negatively too. Because evil has power. It's just not as powerful as good. So it's best, my infinite objective. Because what you do to make money, and they put this emphasis on making people chase after a check and a dollar, and they let that define them. But what I believe is this: what you do to make money, as long as you ain't harming nobody, that's cool. But my life is defined upon whether or not I earn the respect, love, and adoration of the Most High by basically aligning my will with His own. So allowing any personal things my ego, my lower self is into, to dissipate, especially if it's something that's not good, right? Because we all got our vices. So I fight that ish, and I try to align myself with the purpose and the will of Yah. So that's why it's a trick when they tell you, oh, just have faith. Because the true worship of Yah is a way of life. It's not just, getting on your hands and knees and praying. It's not being saved and you're on your deathbed. You don't live some life of debauchery or whatever, and then you just whisper prayer, Yah, forgive me and take my sins. That's a trick. That's a trick, because it makes you not accountable. It makes you think you can just skate through life. Don't believe me? Because a lot of people will say, oh, well, in the New Testament, the old ways were done. And, Jesus, sure, Jesus is them worshiping Zeus. But in the Old Testament, first of all, even the terminology, the old and the new. And if you got certain King James Bible, as soon as you go to the New Testament, it says inspired by men of God. Do you understand how deceptive that is? Inspired by men of God who were inspired to do God's work. But the Old Testament, quote unquote the old, did not say that. It tells you that they were directly talking to Yah in most cases, especially the prophets and the men of old. That's what they were doing, and it boldly tells you that. And it tells you in the old that Yah's ways never change. So to come to the New Testament and then it says, oh, well, the old laws are no more, you have to question that. Anything in the New Testament that contradicts the old, you got to question it. And with real divine scrutiny, because you may be being tricked. And the Bible tells you, let no man deceive you. But you got to ask this. Again, another masterful teaching from the, from His Excellency Ben Ami was, hold on, a thought. I'm so exhausted, the thought just left me. But I'm going to try to catch it. But another teaching was, I can't even think right now. I'm so tired. We'll get back to it. I'll think on it and I'll put up the other video or something when I feel like I ain't mean for it to go this long, but I just got a little passionate and I wanted to, get on here because I'm showing y'all, even in my down days, I'm still focused. I'm still fighting. But, yeah, it just boiled down to, at the end of the day, to serve Yah is to serve your highest self. It really is. It really is, because that's why ancient sayings, the apple don't fall far from the tree, house divided itself can't stand, or, birds of feather flock together, as I was saying earlier, or cut from the same cloth. So if you cut from the same cloth, you are that cloth. You can say you cut an edge of it and then cut that into little pieces, and we can say that's the universe as we know. But it doesn't, and then we are in that. But it's still the cloth. And think about it. When you're having kids, they come from you. So essentially, your children have always been here. In other words, we are only variations of the first humans to ever exist. That's it. It seems like we individuals. But again, when you're looking at your hand, this seems like it's just a hand until you put it under a microscope or any other part of your body. Yeah. But anyway, now I'm a little mad because I can't think of what I was about to say from His Excellency, the Most Honorable Ben Israel. But it'll come back to me at some point. But anyway, until then, I'm about to get me a little rest. I might end up just going to sleep right now. I am tired. And we back on for the workout tomorrow. But if my body keeps feeling like this, I don't know if I'm going to go up just yet. I'm going to do the total gym tomorrow, though, and show y'all what that's like. But either way, well, no, I'm going to just do that number because that's only going to be like 4 reps anyway for each thing. I can handle that. But the show must go on. But I just wanted to share that with you again. This ain't to step on nobody's toes or, refute to just be refuted. This is just simply my observation. And making sense of the world. And I stand and be corrected, but not just because because it's a difference. And I'll end it on this. It's a difference between a man and a woman who wants to do the right things versus wanting what they believe to be right. And most of us are out here, are closed books and can't even hear truth if it hits you in the face because you got a defense mechanism. I remember what I was going to say about the Father. What he said was the area of deception. Because remember in the Bible it said the devil should deceive the whole world. He ain't interested in deceiving you on being where you are. If you a chef, a pilot, if you whatever. The Father did a whole speech on this or whatever, right? But the whole point is he ain't deceiving you in that area. Because it tells you in the Bible he was going to send himself to heaven and be like the Most High. How else do you think he was going to do that? So you have to ask the question, how would he do that? By implanting himself in the very book and the very religions. That's why culture is more powerful
and supersedes a religion, because a religion is just a man-made choice to do whatever the hell you want to do, as if Yah don't have a standard. But Benami spoke about Yah's standards. So if you don't know it, you better study to show yourself approved, so you can align yourself with that will and become a part of that standard. Because now it's up. They know that their time is coming to an end, and they're desperately trying to hit the reset button like they've done plenty of times before. Hell, like they say, it ain't nothing new under the sun, so all this technology and stuff, it look like progress. But in truth, they just roll it out. A lot of this stuff was in existence from the beginning of time. I mean, think about it. If a man was living 900 years, what do you think he was creating in that time? He probably was already creating a lot of the things that, we think of as being modern. But they kept it for themselves. And once technology done got to a certain point, they hit a certain reset button. And that's why you hear the likes of Bill Gates and them talking about, hell, not just talking about it, that's why he going around, depopulating and trying to poison our food. So you can verify the Bible. It's like if I give you instructions on how to, install a light bulb, you can argue all day. A group of people might argue whether that's false information or not. But the man or the woman who takes that instruction and they apply it, it will prove that it's true when the light comes on, right? So when you look at the Bible, instead of just dismissing it, for a lot of people who do that, study it and apply it. The Bible says we come from the dust of the earth. How do you know that to be true? Because it tells you, he created the food, source, being the plants and the fruits. So when you eat that, what does that do? It replenishes you, because that's where you come from. That's why your gut biome is the same as what's in the ground. So when you eating, chemically, induced foods, like from pesticides and stuff, it kills your gut biome just like the way it kills the earth's biome, and you have complications. Just like the earth is nutrient dense, your body stops being able, you become malnourished because your body loses the ability to absorb the nutrients, because it's the same as the system that it's derived from. You can say Yah is the father and the earth is the mother, because she's the womb. Because the earth is a living being. Because when you look in the Bible and it describes what the state of the earth was in, it was in a state very similar to what you see the other planets. And I think those other planets, my theory is, since we were going to live physically forever, those other planets are like still under construction. I don't think they're just there for decoration. I think they're under construction. I think they were there for us to be able to roam this universe freely and live in different worlds, because we were eternal beings. And I believe the earth can grow. But if you look at the earth, it looks alive. So we are like the cells on that. And some of us, like the Epsteins and the Trumps of the world, they're the viruses. And that's why natural disasters come in, because that's the earth's immune system. It's Yah's divine order. So from a micro level, where you're dealing with cells and ants and insects, to a macro level, the animal kingdom as a whole, with the mammals and bigger animals and humans and all that. And then the universal level, whether there's other life forms, I believe there are, and maybe some of them it's still in a perfect state, or maybe some of them made the same mistakes and are in our situation. And I believe that, I don't even believe that the digital world is something man created. I think we just created the tools, we discovered it. Watch movies like Tron and it'll make sense. Or back in the day, it was the show called Reboot, and they showed, like, again, how I've described the body. They showed what goes on. They depicted a lot of the terminology like RAM and hard drives and just stuff like that, as you could just tell they were either places or beings within that computer system. So in other words, there's nothing new under the sun. And if you understand one system, you understand it all. And to worship Yah is to worship your highest self. I'm going to end it there. I'm going to rest and relax. But I'm gonna start cutting these videos down a little bit too, or whatever. The workout ones, no. I might make a few of them like that, or at least speed them up, so you can just see I'm doing it, because I want to show in real time my growth and development. All right. Well, I'm signing out. Hey, I love you all. Have a good night, and we'll get back. Peace.